I don't know about you guys, but I kind of feel like this movie has a bad underlying message at times. Like, teaching people that con artists are cool. Yeah, not really. Zootopia. So Zootopia, overall, I really liked the movie. The thing that I really liked about Zootopia wasn't the fact that it was an animal world. I think you could have just accomplished this just as well with any other characters, but the fact that they put it in an animal world and then kept the characters like to have quirks that we would expect out of animals. For example, when Judy, like thumps her foot on the ground in frustration at the one scene in the police office during the movie, like that was very much still to her character. And so because they had the animal idea implemented into the character, then it made it more interesting instead of just being like they're humans, but surprise, they're animals, because now it's more kid friendly. Like it would have made sense if you made a movie like this with animals and then it's just like anthropomorphic. You guys get what I'm getting at? I just made a bunch of gibberish. Basically, this movie was better. Like, it played the characters that it needed to really well, because it's not trying to say like, oh, but it's kid friendly, surprise, we actually have anthropomorphic animals, and then it shuns everyone else away. I think that like that when they put the anthropomorphic aspect into it and then kind of keep it so that they have still some animalian instincts, then it's much more interesting because the characters are much more quirky and you can kind of expect them to be like, oh yeah, that's definitely a weasel. Like you wouldn't expect a weasel to act like a lion or, just like any other example within the movie. Like I think every character acts exactly to the animal that the movie was trying to portray. And so because of that, I think this movie's biggest strengths rely on its characters. Sure, the characters are like kind of cookie cutter, right? You can kind of predict what they are, but then at the same time, they have character development. They have like interesting arcs, and they're not perfect. Like none of them are perfect. For example, Nick Wilde, he pretends to be like the macho, well, no, not macho, suave kind of con artist, but in reality, he really kind of hates himself and he hates all the people around him, and so he ran away, and Judy's like very outgoing and wants to go pursue her goal, but then she doesn't really ever think of the steps needed to get there and often finds herself tripping over herself, and stuff like that. And so I think the characters are played really well in this movie. And the setting in this movie, oh, it's so beautifully made. And the reason I bring up the setting, and this is because it's an animated movie, and if you think about it, any animated movie started from nothing. They had to start from ground zero. They had to think all of these city designs and, for example, like the juice thing that like raises up so that the giraffes can grab it from the top so it's more accessible for them. Like stuff like that is just so inventive, and the thing that really makes me appreciate it is that someone had to create and design that. And the setting, it's like really fun to watch, and whenever I saw like parts of the scene, I was really tempted to like just like pause, freeze frame, and like look for all the little details in it, just because I was so engrossed by it at times. And it's very colorful, but it's also the setting, when it needs to change, it changes, and you see that because it comes from colorful to a very dark setting, and it plays, again, this movie plays the setting of itself really well. However, I think like the major cons, now I went on a bit about the characters, but I think it also can be a con because they fall into these archetypes that once you've gotten about 45 minutes to an hour into the movie, you can kind of say, okay, yeah, I know what's going to happen here. I know what's going to go on, and so as a result, I at least was like, okay, yeah, I know what's going to happen now. This was a fun movie though, like, but I'm starting to see some patterns here, yada yada, and so I think because the characters fall into an archetype, the movie itself becomes predictable because this movie relies a ton on its characters. And so, like, there was that one part where main characters, Nick and Judy, were running, and then Mayor Bellwether shows up, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is a bit of a weird timing. Like, I remember thinking in my head, because the first time I watched this movie, I was just sitting there enjoying it, right? I wasn't really even thinking of, like, analyzing and reviewing it, but I remember sitting there, though, like, and it's very cut and dry, it's very straightforward, where they're going to go from the train station to the police station, right? And then Bellwether shows up just out of nowhere and completely breaks the storyline. And in my head, I'm like, oh, yep. It still surprised me a couple times afterwards, which was kind of nice because they did make some attempts to break out of those archetypes, but a little predictable. And so I think, and because of that, I think that this movie is only really worth watching once or twice, and then you're like, okay, that was fun. And then if you ever have a night where you're like, oh, I'm bored, I want to watch a fun Disney movie, you pull up Zootopia, and watch Zootopia all over again. The characters themselves are really strong. The plot itself is has some really major twists that once you've seen the movie once, you're like, oh, okay, so it no longer has a big surprise to me. It's no longer nearly as enjoyable the second time around, I think, but it's still a really good movie. But overall, really fun movie, really great watch, really fun characters, fun setting. And I'd say that it's worth your time, worth watching, worth buying on DVD, but I wouldn't buy it full price on Blu-ray with the extended edition unless you're really into the movie. So yeah, that's my review. If you guys think that I could have added anything or could have changed something about this review, comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are awesome, and I will see you on the flip side.